The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here he is, Brandon.
Welcome, fellow Hellions. This is the Brandon Peters Show, and we are here with another installment of Products of the Panic. Joining me, as always, the fifth point of my pentagram from the Saturday Evening Post, Troy Brownfield.
Hail, Brandon.
Yes. Today, Troy and I are going to tackle Devil's Road, the true story of Ed and Lorraine Warren. This was the premiere episode of the series Shock Docs, airing on a Monday, September 7th, 2020 on the Travel Channel. So this was some COVID programming, because there was no movies. I mean, there were movies in the theater, but nobody was going to the theaters pretty much during this time. So some Travel Channel docs that you could put together. Because documentaries and stuff at the time, you could shoot at home. You could do stuff like, I mean, they had camera crews and stuff, but there was a lot of outsourcing for being on the Blu-ray side of things. There was some Zoom videos became acceptable quality for bonus features to keep them going, or hiring out local camera crews to outsource and do stuff. So it's an interesting time in the world of documentary filmmaking. In addition to vintage clips of Ed and Lorraine Warren, it includes, as well as others, including Larry King. This documentary brings together Judy Spera, their daughter, Tony Spera, their son-in-law, Paul Eno, Brian Eno, Jeff Bellinger, Bill Hall, Jason Hawes, and Laura DiDio. Some of them, many of them paranormal investigators. The last one, a news reporter that was hot on the scene during some of these crimes. Before we dive in, Troy, I would like your general thoughts on the Warrens. But I want to include, I got two things I want to ask first before you go on this.
Yes.
Do you believe that the Warrens ever found credible evidence, work, or helped in any case documented or maybe not documented?
I do not believe, which is probably an important position to start with. I'm approaching anything with some healthy skepticism, but the Warrens in particular, the more I've learned and the more I've seen other people look into it, try to apply things, actually interview them, try to debunk stuff successfully, the more and more it becomes, to me, to borrow a wrestling phrase, a work.
Okay, so the second question, do you believe the Warrens truly believed in the work that they were doing and that in what they were finding?
I think that one's much harder to quantify, because there's really only two options. I think there's the option that they were misguided true believers that really tried to win people over and really tried to help them, and then there's the opportunism thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even people that think they're full of shit tend to want to believe that they believed it, because if it's the opportunism thing, then it makes them really awful people.
Do you think,
and that's without the one thing that we'll probably address later.
Gotcha, because I have to wonder. So one, I think that I think they probably found some things that maybe was there that we just don't know whether we can't explain it, but just because we can't explain it doesn't mean it's supernatural.
Right.
Or maybe found some odd situations. As far as the believing thing, I have to think that there's a point where both yes and no is true, because I think it could start out that way and evolve in a way.
Yeah,
but,
I get you.
But it could also evolve in a way where they still believe, but they also know they're huckstering at the same time. Like that they're like, well, we're not finding shit as like we'd like to, but we can make these, like, or at least be present everywhere we can to make it believe that we are all, like we're always doing stuff, even though we barely find stuff, like maybe it's there. So I don't want to. I do believe, yeah, they definitely take advantage to get on TV and stuff, and just in the name of just wanting it out there or whatever like that. But
Yeah.
fame hits you, and then you don't go away. If the work was important, you just do the work and not worry, and the work would just sell itself and eventually bleed out, and you wouldn't have to keep going to the public
Yeah.
and stuff. But yeah, so that's I think it's important for us to establish that kind of thing before we dive into this, so people know that we don't catch them by surprise, or they think might go, like me personally with paranormal. Like I have this thing where, like, I think paranormal stuff like it's more I want it paranormal stuff to be there than I actually like fully am in on it, and I also don't understand why every paranormal thing or possibility has to have a Christian explanation to it.
Right.
Why is it always the Christian like Jewish people don't have gods, Muslim, Buddhist, like why don't they have paranormal stuff? Like why is it always the Christian, it's the devil explanation? Why is it always like explained from some other from this piece of fiction explains this paranormal reality that we're going through? Why is it always that, like it's
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say like a full scale, ruling out of anything, paranormal, alien, etc.
Mhm.
I would love. I'm not an enthusiast that goes to the conventions or anything, but
Yeah.
man, I'd love it if Bigfoot was real.
Yeah,
That would.
that's my thing. It's a lot of it as I've grown older, it's been more of a want
Yeah,
in my curiosity than a actual I'm 100% in, because it feels like as technology has improved, as we've evolved, these become less and less. And remember, like, who talks about the Bermuda Triangle anymore, right?
yeah,
It, like, we used to have scary commercials for books written on it. There was the whole Amelia Earhart mystery, all this shit, like all sorts of stuff, and it's like, yeah, some bad coordinates, bad, area to fly, like it's explained. So,
yeah. The maritime mysteries of things like the Mary Celeste and so forth,
mhm.
they recede further back. I mean, like we do have an airliner that disappeared that nobody knows where the fuck it went. So I mean,
Right.
that's fairly recent. And Time did an article on mysterious disappearances. Not
Time
too.
used to be the king in the 80s of 90s of creepy volumized
Yeah.
stuff that you're like,
Well, yeah, like Time Magazine did it, and I did one on mysterious disappearances, and they called the Lauren Spear case one of just the craziest missing person cases
mm,
ever. And I resent. I wouldn't say I would hesitate to call it like the craziest, because it does feed into pretty blonde white girl missing white woman syndrome because it got so much attention. But that girl fucking vanished
yeah.
from Bloomington, and it's crazy that there was never anything, so that's one of those cases where it's like, but we don't have as many, oh, this boat completely disappeared, or this completely disappeared, as you would say the Bermuda Triangle thing.
Hmm.
And there's a really interesting, I think it's still on Hulu, 3-part documentary series called Sasquatch. And I forget the cat's name, but the guy that's the main reporter and executive producer, he did all kinds of interesting stuff like infiltrate the Hells Angels and all these
Hmm.
kinds of things.
Oh, okay.
And he does this documentary about like allegedly murders that were committed by a Sasquatch. And as the documentary unfolds, it becomes less about Sasquatch and what's going on with these illegal weed fields that still exist under the cover of the woods in California. It's amazing. And
Oh,
it
that's
still
good.
has that strain of the Bigfoot
Yeah.
story in it, but it's like the myth leads to an exploration of the myth, which leads to a true crime
Mm-hmm.
thing, and it's really just super interesting. But again, it's like, oh man, we were looking for Bigfoot. What we found was uh an unsolved crime.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So
I,
yeah.
yeah, I always go back to, like, I always leave room out there for myself to believe, because I personally, the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life was the first. We moved into this new house when I was like, I believe it was fifth grade. So I was like 10 or so, or 11, whatever age you are in fifth grade, and 11, that would be it. Yeah, 10 or 11. And my mom asked me to get something from downstairs in our basement, from my sister's playroom, and I went in there, I turned down the light, and there was like a bouncy ball, and it was just in the middle of the room, and it just dropped. And I was like, I was scared shitless to go in that basement for like the first couple weeks we lived in that house, and I had all the cool stuff in it, and I had my own playroom in there and stuff. I was like, nope, nope, nope. Especially if the lights, if it was dark outside, I was like, nope, nope. Mm-mm. But there were no windows in that room or anything like that. But there was a ball. It was like in the middle of the room. Just, it would, like, when I turned the light on, it was there, frozen in the air, and just dropped. I know what I saw. I know everything. I'm like, I don't know how the fuck that happened. So that has always
Used to
freaked
meet
me out.
you, Brandon.
Yeah. Welcome to the house.
We're not strangers anymore.
Right. But no, I had no other paranormal happenings happening in that house as well. So, but that is the one thing that I was like, oh wow, that freaked me out as a kid. Like, pretty sure what I saw. And I
Yeah.
have it engraved in my memory, so I
I
can't
gotta
explain
admit,
it.
I had a couple of weird experiences with my buddy Terry when he was really into, this is about our freshman year in college. He was really into trying to investigate paranormal shit. And we had
Mhm.
a couple of funny that we'll all maybe
Oh,
we'll
dude,
save
I
that,
did that too. But yeah, continue.
we'll save that for a different one.
Yeah.
Um the there were a couple that were really funny, and a couple that had easy explanations, and a couple that were
Hmm.
much harder to explain, but it was still just um never anything beyond, oh, that story was hilarious, as opposed to, I touched the ethereal plane.
Yeah, we had when I was in college, my last year at Ball State, me and a couple other guys I lived with, like, we were late night people, and we are just bored in the middle of the night. And we're like, one night we are just like, there's this place that was like, it was a list of haunted places in Indiana, and we're like, I wonder how long it takes to drive to these, and we just started picking one a night and going to them once a week or so, and like, you'd find ones. There was one where there was a church in this one place, and it like asked you to run like 10 laps around it, and then you go here and you see this. I'm like, yeah, you're dizzy as shit and tired. So like, that's why you feel like, it was like, there was one. I mean, it took us to some areas where it was like, no, fuck no, I'm not going there. Like, you'd be like cemeteries and you see like bullet holes and shit
Yeah.
and around. I'm like, yeah, we're not stopping the car to go. Like, there was one where, like, I was really excited because it was like, if you went one way, if you counted one way, you counted 10 tombstones. But if you went back, there were 11. We didn't do it because it was like, no, there's going to be hillbillies hiding in the woods going to shoot us or something. So
Yeah.
that was the scariest part, not the paranormal. But we did find one night. We'll get to this documentary, folks. I'm sorry. We did find, we were looking for a place in Daleville, Indiana, or something like that, and we couldn't. We were struggling to find it, and we go to this bar, and we asked about something. And it was like literally Friday the 13th, where you go in and ask where Camp Crystal Lake is, like and the whole place is like, what? And this, I swear to God, this hillbilly was like, they're talking about the spook house. And we're like, that must be it. Like, don't go bother them people. We're like, what? They're like, you leave them alone. You don't want to mess with, don't, this. We're like, where is the spook house? Like, oh man, you don't know. You'd leave those people alone. We're like, oh, okay. And we left out the bar, and some guy came out. It's like, hey, listen, it's down there. Blah, blah, blah. Don't tell them I told you. And we're like, okay. And we went. It is literally a school for like telekinesis that's in like that in Daleville, Indiana. Like, it's like Xavier School for the Gifted. Like a little, it's like a mini campus, and It's for clairvoyant people. It's for like like spirit. It's very more spiritual than it is telekinesis and stuff like that. But it's a very private campus, gated. Everything else, we're like, this is not what we were looking for. But this is did not know this existed here anywhere. Like, but that was what they called. They called it the spook house. There was no house. It was like literally like a little like dormitory and a couple buildings. It was like spook house. So anyway, let's get to our shock doc, the um the Devil's Road, true story of Ed and Lorraine Warren. This documentary goes over some of their most high profile or important in their history cases, or that mean something. Kind of jumps around. They start we start with a case, and then we learn history and little details around them. But we start in 1974 with the case at 966 Lindley Street. There's reportings of dishes flying across the room and smashing on the floor. I think they picked this one because it's the first time like the Warrens got into a more media spotlight with their stuff. I think that's why this one got picked. A crucifix on the wall bursts. Table picks itself up. Knives flew out of a holder. Furniture's appliances moved. There was a black mass that like felt like a bird skeleton. It was like a solid structure when someone touched it. Let's see. Firemen and police bear witness to this stuff. Lots of people, like crowds build around. It's the first case with a lot of eyewitnesses to it. What happens is there's this big hubbub, and then all of a sudden, the chief of police, Chief Walsh, calls it off. The little girl in the house admits to doing it all. According to Ed Warren, it's impossible this was a hoax. This is the most powerful, most credible cases of paranormal activity ever recorded, and it was recorded. We get played eyewitness testimony from police. Please note though that The Exorcist had opened just months before this happened, and this was, I don't think we can explain. I didn't live this, but I did a lot of studying on like 70s films, and especially fan of The Exorcist and Friedkin, and knowing this movie is a fucking phenomenon. It scared America on its own right. It made people Christians overnight. People actually thought they saw the devil itself in that movie. Like it changed people. Like, and I don't know that any movie has done that to people since. That they not in the sense that they felt true to life with this, as opposed to just having an effect as a work of fiction. Because I feel like people really felt like they saw something with The Exorcist, the way it's talked about from the 70s. So, so keep that in mind, that was on the brain of people, and that's why crowds they were looking for this phenomenon in real life all of a sudden, and high time for, like I said, I think, Troy, we talked about one time that The Exorcist may have played a hand in being like early goings of the Satanic Panic. Like it's a piece that unintentionally so, because Friedkin would have told you you're all fucking idiots. But R.I.P. One of our greatest, bluntest people in the world. So Troy, your thoughts on this case?
Well, let me speak to The Exorcist real quick. Last year when it had the 50th anniversary screenings, had the opportunity to see it in the theater. And The Exorcist, possibly with Halloween, maybe with, I don't know, Horror of Dracula, probably other Carpenter stuff. The horror movie I've seen the most is probably The Exorcist. And it's just, I appreciate it more and more over time. And just the framing, the atmosphere, everything that Friedkin did worked to an insane degree. And, I get it from the point of view that if you are open to certain kind of spiritual experiences or whatnot, or you have a particular religious inclination, The Exorcist probably deeply fucked you up.
Yeah.
Probably,
Well, I think one
it
of the
probably
important.
reached inside and
Mhm.
squeezed.
I think one of the important things with a film like The Exorcist that makes it so strong, and this um is that Friedkin himself and Blatty writing the book are working through personal demons and finding things out about themselves and their relationship with a religion or not with one at the same time that helps in the characterization, helps in the performances. And Scorsese does this too. Movies like Silence, Last Temptation of Christ, and some other ones he's
Yeah.
explored where they're working out stuff and it becomes personal, and then it takes on to the audience because you see these deep characterizations and thematics at play that are just presented in such a compelling and horrific way.
Yeah, and it looks and sounds incredible even now. Like
Yeah.
it looks so good, and I now just because of freaking talking about it in documentaries and stuff, like how they did some of the sounds and whatnot.
Hmm.
And I almost wish I didn't know, because some of that stuff is not done by anybody else.
Right. Right.
And it doesn't sound like any other flick, especially of the era.
Hmm.
And my God, does it look good? I mean, it's the framing in that. And I watched Friedkin's standalone documentary, like the documentary length interview he did
Hmm.
about it. He talked about the individual Rembrandts he referenced and like this painting, and
Hmm.
how he framed it based on, and then the intersecting shots of the
Yeah.
priest stairs, and his conception of it is next level in terms of he knew exactly how certain things were going to look and how people would respond emotionally to how it looked, because Rembrandt
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And it's like it just resonates.
Hmm.
And so I think that you're right, that in a country that is going through some shit, Vietnam,
Yeah.
Watergate, everything, like, you don't have faith in the institutions, you don't have faith in this. Maybe your personal faith is shaken to the core. The Exorcist out there, you're deeply freaked out, and shit starts falling off the shelves.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
it's a little easier in that context to believe, like, you've lost, that reality is slipping.
Hmm.
And but yeah, it's interesting to see all these caps in the situation. Um, and maybe I would have understood that less had we not just had the situation where the police officer opened fire on his own car because the acorn fell out of the tree and hit it. That story that got a lot of national news coverage, where the woman said they're firing shots, and it was the acorn fell and hit the
Oh,
cop car,
geez.
opens up on his own car. So that's instructive in the way that even people who are trained to respond to this can panic when everyone around you is panicking and you don't know what's happening. And so if someone's stage managing, I'm gonna make this fall, I'm gonna make this happen, I'm gonna make this sound, and a bunch of people are freaking out. It's the same thing as when you enter a haunted house attraction.
Hmm.
You're willingly surrendering reality. It's
Yeah.
college kids in costumes, it's like little air guns, it's loose boards on the floor, but you surrender to the funhouse aspect of it.
Yeah.
This is like a real world variation. They're going in, it's a haunted house. We've got the ghost hunters here and everything. Like, you're going to hear a creaky board. You're not going to think nobody nailed that down. You're going to think Satan.
Yeah.
And so it prepares you mentally for you to receive this information and interpret it a different way than you would if the lights were on and you weren't told that it's haunted. And
Right. That's true. There's a heightened aspect of it, like, oh, this is a house of Satan before you enter here, Mr. Fireman. But do you think it's like possible this little girl does all this stuff, like, or how is this like like how are they seeing, like, are they being in the dark and being told it was out of this, and you just think, oh yeah, I saw a knife fly out of this thing, because in reality you were told it but you didn't see it. Is that sort of what we're going for here? Or
I think that's very possible. I think people are,
because a lot of
very,
stuff is described as happening here, and I'm like, well, how the hell's a little girl do that? Like, did they not have the cabinets screwed into the walls too
oh,
much, or like?
maybe there was someone else doing it too. I
Yeah.
mean, it's also easy to say, "Oh, the little girl did it," when an adult member of the family is also doing it.
Yeah.
The girl's not gonna get arrested or anything. False reporting.
Yeah.
I
Like,
mean,
yeah, it's
like I
just
said, I'm the Scully here, man. I'm sorry. I got to
right.
see the
No, I'm just
paranormal
trying
up in
to,
the car.
yeah, I'm just trying to think of like, there's a lot of stuff as like stuff that explainable and stuff, but they were there for how long were they? They really, it sounds like they were there for like weeks, and then the chief of
Yeah,
police is like, get out of my town, but it's probably days, right?
yeah, it's gotta be.
And like, I get that they're like, here's the testimony caught on tape. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the thing, man. Like, that's a recording. Do we know that's that actual police? Like, I can't look up who that, like it's
Yeah,
it's to hear him like describe stuff. Yeah, sure, but like, how do I know he was the one there? How do I know that wasn't recorded once the Warrens got back and had a friend do it? Like, like I
yeah,
don't know, like these silenced police officers are like, I can't tell like. Now I'll tell you what, the police chief in the video clips they do have does come off as like, nonsense teens, get out of my town. Like so he plays right into what the Warrens want, because he looks suspiciously like, just clear this out, like he's trying to. He comes off like he's trying to push something under the rug, which I'm like, that only plays into their hand.
yeah,
Like, I get it. He wants this nonsense out of his town real quick, but like, he's coming across as like that guy in a movie that's like, Jesus Christ, dude, and like 3 people die like the next week from it.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Which you said it perfectly. It plays right into
mm,
their hands. I'm sure that if they were welcomed with open arms into every town,
hmm
it would be a little boring.
yeah, yeah,
That it's gotta be. And I was checking notes, so there's a funny thing. Ray Garton, um, who I had some roundabout dealings with myself, but Ray
okay,
Garton, horror writer, wrote a book based on one of the Warrens cases and worked
hmm
with the Warrens himself. And in terms of what he believed, he's actually quoted as saying, if Lorraine told me the sun was coming up tomorrow morning, I'd get a second opinion, in reference to, you know, the craziness.
Well, I read some people's talks about uh like Lorraine's clairvoyancy. Like, yeah, she was clairvoyant, but she wasn't a good one. Like they admit like she had something, but she was not a good one. Like, that's like, I'm like, oh, okay, shit. um, but yeah, this case, I feel like there's more details and like, oh, this really happened with this case than most of them that they put on this documentary. Like, this is the one to hook us in to watch the remaining like hour and 15 minutes of this documentary.
Right.
Because it's like, oh man, were we actually going to see something found? It's like, no, pictures of outside. Like, where are their cameras inside? Like, they don't show us the wreckage.
Yeah.
Like, if you're wanting proof, a camera's your best friend. Like, even if it's the aftermath, like there's like a crucifix blew up on the wall. Like, well, where is it? Like, why didn't you take a picture of it broken?
Well, I think that, there's two levels of that. Number one would be maybe they don't want to put the cameras in because nothing's going to happen. Or maybe even if they have something to show, it would be something that would be so minuscule or whatnot, it wouldn't show
Yeah,
up. This probably won't be the first time I reference it, but Ghostbusters,
yeah.
when they first get to the library and Ray says, "You forget I was present in an unexplained underwater mass sea sponge migration," and and Vickman's like, "They migrated about 1.5 feet, right?" It's like,
Yeah,
there's like a comment there about the taking like 7 hours,
right,
but
right.
they migrated 1.5 feet. So maybe that's part of the cameras are never on because maybe paranormal stuff is boring on camera.
Yeah. Well, it's like
Oh,
my friend Sean Burris, who is a paranormal investigator, used to have a show at A&E. Says paranormal investigating is very boring, and you don't find much a lot of the times, or you don't find anything a lot of times. And he's like, he's been going lately on to like try to expose ghost shows for building it up and stuff, and like being a you know dampening the effect of what the actual research and studies do, and by fake sounds, all that stuff. He's like, no, stuff doesn't happen. But and he also says, because I asked him one time, I was like, is the rise of technological advances and dwindled reports and anything? He's like, no, typically the paranormal love technology. So that's his take on that. So from the paranormal, the true believer side of things, that's what I can bring up. If I'm misquoting you, Sean, and you're listening, I apologize, but that's sort of the things because I, as a skeptic, have asked him quite like he's very open to asking stuff about it, and he's very skeptical about everything as well. So that's why I
think
like his take.
I think another element of my Ed and Lorraine skepticism was like Michelle remembers, I first encountered it. I first encountered their stories in tabloids.
Yeah,
because they would be like the spooky true stories in the Inquirer and stuff of like, and Lorraine Warren investigated this place, and I recalled them from the two headshots. They always have the headshots side by side in the picture, and I just remember, I can't tell you the details of which ones. I just remember them existing. Like they told these stories many times, and that's who they went to. And sure, they got profiled every once in a while in a bigger magazine like a People or whatever, but it was always, the Inquirer.
yeah. The Weekly World News Star or the Sun.
And then they became regular talk show people.
Right. Which we'll get to a little bit later. Well, so once this case is over, we move on to Ed and Lorraine's history. It talks about seeing a woman's face when he was younger. His dad saying everything in this house has a logical explanation, but never gave me one. Lorraine's clairvoyance, seeing a light aura around people. Ed was an usher at a movie theater growing up. That's where they met. And then what really gets him into it is he has a wartime incident in the Navy. He's trying to heroically save a man's life, and he prays, and this fire parts, and he's able to swim through it. Now explain that. I'm like, I wasn't there. I don't know that I can believe you. So that's where he takes him. And we move to the next case, which is one of their first. It's the Ocean-born Mary House, which I believe happened in the 1950s. Is that correct?
I think so. Yeah,
because they're around for a long time before they come a name.
Yeah, and the New England, the New England Psychic Research. Hang on, let me check. They found that in 1952, I believe.
Gotcha. So what they like?
Yeah, New England Society for Psychic Research, NESPR,
gotcha.
Which is the oldest ghost hunting group in New England, which they founded 52.
The club. It's not a real thing. No. Yeah. So from what I gather, Ed liked painting haunted houses, and he'd go to them, paint them, and they'd talk to the owners about their ghosts. And this one's where Lorraine has this out of body trance experience, and the guy's like, "Yeah, it happens a lot of clairvoyance in this house," and it was the first time I knew not to fear death. And this experience pushed them onward to go seek out and find more haunted happenings.
Yeah, and it's again, it's presented in a way that's very hard to prove or disprove.
Yeah.
You can't say one way or the other. It's a thing that happened.
Did she have a seizure? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, which was, going back to the historical ceremonies and stuff, there were a lot of cases where people who had seizures, they thought that either they were possessed or alternatively maybe being touched by the Holy Spirit, depending on
schizophrenia was possession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What denomination you were in. It's like, someone began to, or the phenomenon of people in religious services shaking and lurching across the floor, snake handling, all this. So there's always been an association between like loss of bodily autonomy with spiritual kind of stuff.
Yeah. You mentioned New England. There's lots of paranormal activity in New England. Families and such asking Ed and Lorraine to check out their homes. We have a story about Ed talking about his father when he was 8 years old, told him a story about an exorcism.
Well, do you think, I mean, and this is, obviously they go to other places, they go to England and whatnot,
Mhm.
but in New England, do you think that's because when you really think about the history of New England, that's like Hawthorne country,
Yeah.
Washington Irving, like these deeply puritanical colonies. That,
Salem.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
hold up with that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all these stories, Lovecraft. I mean, that's that region of the country.
Hmm.
So, is there something? Maybe it's more haunted, or is it is it that your proclivity is from that culture to believe that explanation, or I mean,
That's partially embedded in the culture. Like
yeah,
I also like I talk about a lot with like these our current political climate and the fear of immigrants and these borders and all of this. And I feel like there is a built-in stigma or mental thought process in the United States of America. I don't know if Canadians feel this way as well, because remember, we're not America. They're America too. So is
yeah.
Mexico and South
Those
America.
next,
There's South America, but so in the United States, I feel like we have this built-in sense of, because of the way we're educated stuff, we took this from somebody, somebody's going to try to take it from us. And we have this like defensive this about letting others in all of a sudden. And I
yeah,
feel like that's been inherent in our culture. Like it's coming to like a bad head now, but it's always sort of been that way.
yeah,
Um, Calling people illegals and like just worrying
yeah,
about that border and all that stuff. And it's like I feel like there's like this stuff built in with it, because I don't hear about it with other countries and everything about getting, at least at this height. But granted, I live here, but like I feel like there's a sense of, fearing that someone's going to take it from us one day because we took it from someone else. That's sort of
yeah.
what how I feel. But
Well, there's also, I don't know, the it here, I'll say this just because you brought it up. I feel like the thing of immigrants from the southern border
Mhm.
coming to take jobs is just the weirdest fear, because none of those people that complain want the jobs that the immigrants come to get.
Yeah,
They don't want those jobs, and no one cares, and I certainly don't, if we have people who come from India, China, etc., to be doctors in the
yeah,
United States. But good on them. I didn't
yeah,
want to be a doctor.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
also the ones coming from the south and stuff, I've seen many cases where they want to come, make some money, and then go back. Like they don't
yeah.
want to stay here. Like they're trying to make more money and then go back there. Like
Well,
it's yeah.
yeah, it's, and it's not, and maybe there are, but I would love to see a comprehensive study of people who are really against immigration because of job loss, to see what their job is and if their job is actually in danger of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess at a very widespread, very not.
Right. Yeah. Anyways.
What do you do, dude? I'm a plumber.
Yep. Back to Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're labeled the seekers of the supernatural in the '60s, and not much of the public really believes or cares in them at this time. They try to convince Catholic priests and churches to get involved. Like, and Ed says, you would be surprised how many Catholic priests don't believe in the devil. They say he hides behind his Catholicism. Or no, he tells of like what people think of him. They say I hide behind my Catholicism. No, I use my Catholicism.
Yeah, and we talked about this most recently in Michelle remembers, but the 60s were a very low religious period in the United States, which
Right.
had a lot to do with, there was the counterculture movement and a lot of other things that were making it fade.
Mm-hmm.
And there were divides. In Danse Macabre, Stephen King talks about, this goes to The Exorcist a little bit, that one of the reasons that he thinks The Exorcist was popular with parents was because there was this 60s, early 70s deep-seated fear of losing your kids to drugs and hippies and all. This was like that fear made manifest. And like he says in the book, I have a feeling Reagan McNeil would have enthusiastically joined in with the fish cheer at Woodstock. But he comments on that, and that's why, you know, like The Exorcist was a runaway hit in America because that whole youth thing was a big deal, whereas Dawn of the Dead was a massive hit in Germany because their fear set is completely different.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And it was just interesting, but this is exactly what you're talking about with the dip in religion in the 60s. And yeah, Ed's not getting anybody to buy it because in order to attract more people to the church, they were trying a big reframe of, not so much with the devil. And as opposed to now, which is hell all the time.
Yeah.
But then
they're in the Oval Office.
But then you hilariously have like 67, Levin writes Rosemary's Baby.
Yep.
Which, of course, Levin, not Catholic, is it's almost and again in Danse Macabre, Tabitha King makes the comment that Rosemary's Baby is almost a satire of why mixed religious marriages don't work.
Yeah.
Because Rosemary purports to be an atheist, but she's really still very Catholic underneath it.
Yeah.
And Guy is not an atheist, he's a hedonist. Toward Satanist. And so you have all these religious questions that are in the culture that are very thorny, but Ed's at least presenting himself as a true believer. Maybe the truest. With a little bit of clairvoyance.
Yes. He's the guy. He's even fighting the Catholic Church isn't doing as much as Ed Warren is. As we move to the next case in Rhode Island, it's the Conjuring House from 1971. The case that we all knew from the hit movie. Ed says, "I don't go looking for devils or ghosts. I try to find a natural explanation for what's going on." That's what he says. This house had a family move in. When they were moving in, they saw a man in the house. They thought it was the previous owner, but nothing there. An older woman apparition was there. Objects moving. The mother cut an orange and blood spurted out. The mother seemed to be a focal point of negative energy. This, of course, resulted in a seance. The mother, Caroline, got overpowered and thrown across the floor, speaking in tugs. And it all culminated in the husband punching Ed Warren in the face, kicking them out. Goodbye, Warrens. It was a failed case. And that's exactly how the movie played out. You remember when Ron Livingston went and punched Patrick Wilson in the face and get the fuck out of my house? That's the best part. But anyways, so that is the Conjuring House.
Well, okay, a couple of things. James Wan's involvement in The Conjuring was kind of weird. For people that don't know, our casual viewers, 2004, James Wan and Lee Winnell create Saw. Lee Winnell is the guy in the room. James Wan's the director.
They both wrote it together. Yeah.
Yeah. They make it for $1 million. It makes $100 million, and then they do Insidious. And Wan is kind of looking for the next thing, and then someone brings him, The Conjuring, and it's like, ooh, and Wan and the gang, being no dummies, see the potential of this is a franchise.
Yeah.
And because there's all these cases, and it's like, if we can make a successful film of one case.
If there's one thing that's an added element that helps sell horror, is based on a true story.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with the Conjuring thing is just very interesting because I wouldn't even say it was the most famous case they've been involved in. It would be the Amityville Horror, but we'll get to that at least in passing. But the Conjuring case, is interesting. It's got all the classics. It's got a family in a new house. It's got apparitions. It's
Mm-hmm.
got stuff going crazy in seances. I mean, it vibes like the way that you'd expect a story. The thing that elevates this is James Wan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but an interesting point is that during this, and we'll get to it, they have to specifically, at the behest of Lorraine, not depict anything sexual between Ed and Lorraine in the story. They have to depict no implication of an affair that Ed might be having. They have to avoid suggesting a bunch of certain stuff, and they were kind of like, okay, weird, but whatever. But it's that has to do with other stuff in the background. So
There was
while
also a woman who had to sign stuff saying she would not say anything during the release of these movies.
yeah, yeah, and so it's kind of interesting that you know this becomes in a way the new most famous case because the way
Mhm.
that the Amityville Horror was filmed, the movie doesn't really have Ed and Lorraine Warren in it,
No, no.
and
The book
they're
doesn't either, correct?
they're mentioned in the book, but
Okay.
it's different. You know what I mean? The whole thing is framed differently.
Okay.
But it's been a while since I read the book, um, but yeah, I'd have to go back and look at that. I don't know um, if I have a copy in the house at the moment or not, but I might. But um, yeah, certainly the story here tracks with a lot of other things that we've heard before. That the family reports a thing,
Mm-hmm.
they say that they saw a thing, nobody else has seen the thing. How do you prove that there was a thing? And yeah, some of the families, the Warrens leave, and some of the families will say, "Oh, the Warrens were great; they helped us." But man, there's a whole lot of families that don't ever talk about
Yeah.
their experiences.
That's the thing. When I was watching it, it came up in my mind. They taught thousands of cases, thousands.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, maybe thousands were submitted to them, but did they seriously go and check out all of those?
yeah,
There's no time humanly if you're doing full investigations. Like, no, I want to know more about the cases the Warrens called bullshit on. That's more interesting to me than these. Out and out in 2024, which came out, and even in 2020, I'm more interested in. I want to see and hear about when the Warrens said no or called bullshit because they did. They didn't
yeah,
take every case. Like I'm far more fascinated in what doesn't make it or what people tried to pull on them or them getting almost entrapped and stuff than these cases. I don't know why. Maybe because it just seems so obvious when we hear these stories and then we did this and then it was gone. But like seeing their methodology of trimming the fat, them being skeptical of things and how they go about and was like, no, you don't got anything here. Or I would love to see that process because it sounds like it happened more often than not. Than
yeah,
we'll pick, here's 10 cases that everybody knows about, pick 5 to cover this on, like, no, we seem to know the same cases over and over with them.
yeah. That's one of the things I was going to say. It's like
They
when you
tout
get,
thousands, but we've only heard about of 8, like very
yeah.
well.
So there's the one that you referred to, which is the first Conjuring, the Enfield Poltergeist in England, which is the second. The Devil Made Me Do It, which is
Hmm.
literally Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do
Yeah, which we'll
It.
get to in this. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Annabelle,
Hmm.
which is over here. Um, you have very few, and then The Haunting in Connecticut.
Yep.
But that's kind of the end of the big ones.
Hmm.
And all these cases, purported, like you said, they've been there for weeks and so forth. Well, what happened to the other ones? What happened to the ones where, did you turn up and what was it?
Yeah. Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
like you were there for 12 hours.
Right.
You know, which
Yeah.
in a way Ghostbusters sort of plays with, going back to Ghostbusters. because I think that's what a lot of people think of when you say paranormal investigators.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they classify all these different ghosts so that you have like the Slimer ghost, you have the major ones and everything, but you know, it's all the same thing, right? It's all
Yeah.
the same thing to them. So do the Warrens ever show up and it's like, oh, they're knocking on the walls, blah blah blah, say 12 Hail Marys, everything. Oh, they're done. Oh,
Yeah.
it's a restless spirit. It just needs to move on. This is
No, look,
Lorraine.
we're done in time for lunch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, is it like that? What's it like?
Yeah. And we never hear about them. Like, they never went looking for money, but it's like, what did they charge though? Oh,
Yeah.
was there a charge? Was there like, this is without any, this documentary is made without any tough questions, any juicy details. It lacks in that. There's not a bit of skepticism in this. The only thing skepticism is met with in this is disgust. Like that's pretty much how this documentary plays.
Yeah, and they mention frequently Ed wrote a lot of books. He wrote a lot of books on but I don't know if they've ever casually seen an Ed Warren book in the wild. Like, did these
Hmm.
sell well in the 60s? Did they live off the option money?
Yeah.
Was the museum that much of a success? Did the Inquirer pay what? Like, what were the parameters of how they made the living? And their daughter, Judy, did not, despite what the movie show, she allegedly did not live with them. She lived with the grandparent
Oh, okay.
most of the time because they were off doing this.
Yeah.
So
Quest
she
for
was
peace.
out of the house. Um, but
Where your
it's
mom
not
and
really
dad at? Battling Satan.
that's right. Well, it's not really answered. I mean, how they made the living and everything.
Hmm. Yeah. Um. So we branch it out, and we're up to the Amityville house, which was 1976. Um. So we're not gonna go too deep into the Amityville one, as Troy and I have plans for this as a part of Products of the Panic as a whole.
Uh,
Um. But like it's really weird to me that these Lutzes. So if you don't know the Amityville story, there's Ronald DeFeo Jr. Was he a junior?
yeah, yeah,
So he's this kid. He one night goes in his house, shoots his parents with a shotgun, shoots his sibling with a shotgun, and yeah, there you go. Years later, the next people to move into it is this Lutz family. Crazy shit happens. They call in the Warrens. They don't really fix it. The Lutzes like lots of extras were brought in. This is like high profile. Lots of them, not just the Warrens. They were hoping to film an exorcism during this. That was the Warrens' goal with this one.
yeah,
But the funny thing is, like, the Lutzes had a press conference to announce they were leaving their home before they even called in the experts. Like, who has a fucking press conference? Like, why would you have a press conference about leaving your house? Like, and who
yeah,
are the Lutzes going in that this would be important? So, like, a lot of my stuff, um, so like they end up letting the bank foreclose on the house, move to California shortly after, and then look, a book and movie deal comes when they move to California. Um, I've always felt in the Lutz's case, DeFeo, devil made him do it. Okay, whatever.
yeah,
That's another story. But like the Lutzes I feel like with the Lutzes, there's the chance that they saw what was happening with the Warrens. They saw what the notable tropes that you've been naming, Troy,
yeah,
about these cases. Something happened that they weren't going to be able to afford this house anymore, or didn't like something with the house, and decided to go for this as a way to get out of their mortgage.
yeah. There, one,
And it works for them, right? Like,
yeah, William
ideally.
Weber. I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
William Weber, who I believe might have been one of their lawyers. He said in an interview with People that he and the Lutzes and maybe it was a couple other people. They cooked the whole story up like knocking out a few bottles of wine. And that Jay Henson wrote the book based on these hours of tapes that the Lutzes gave him, like supposedly describing the experience. But and I've commented on this before, the way that the book is written is so over the top with like an incredibly large number of exclamation points. But the stuff with like seeing the pig's face in the window and the
Mm-hmm.
flies, a lot of the stuff that is manifested in the film version of it. You know, it's always happening with one person or two people there. It's not, there's no documented evidence that it happens. The most effective scene in the movie, I think, is the one
Mm-hmm.
where and not to get too deep into it, is the one where James Brolin can't find the money that
Mm.
was lost. That gets you right here.
Yeah.
You go back to Todd Macabre, King talks about he said like Rosemary's Baby and Exorcist are religious horror films, but Amityville Horror is really a financial horror film.
Yeah.
It comes out like the housing crisis of the 70s. There's all kinds of people like, oh shit, like think of the bills.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that there's that Warren connection to it, because it is I think that you're talking about it in a way. Why would the Lutzes have a press conference? Because there is now a mechanism by which you can be famous for a haunting.
Yeah. And calling out to the Warrens to come to you, or
Yeah,
and whoever else.
kind of like Michelle with the thing, like generates a cottage industry of Satanic Panic books,
Mm-hmm.
because people see that you can get famous and be on talk shows if you
Right.
had this thing happen to you.
Very true.
So I think that might be it. I don't. It's also interesting how, in a lot of ways, um, the Warrens had receded from popular culture until the movies
Mm-hmm.
of the 2000s, and I think that there's almost a thing of Hollywood was in search of new horror heroes and franchises,
Yeah.
and as our friend Scott Mendelson is fond of saying, the Conjuring is the only true successful ongoing post-Marvel cinematic universe.
Yep. Yeah, it is cleverly, because they, self-contained movies will do that for you that help. But so the Amityville case, we trust me, we'll go deeper dive on this, in the future. Um, Ed and Lorraine become bigger public pop culture figures because of this case. I have a question, and I couldn't find the answer. Were they ever on the 700 Club?
Oh, I don't know, and
Like, I was wondering that. I'm like, I feel like they'd have shown at some point.
they got to be right, because at a certain point they were like ghost hunters, and then Ed starts calling himself a demonologist,
Yeah.
which fits into that hierarchical structure of now I'm available for church talk shows.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could find it. I'm sure we could find that they did. It just had to happen. PTL or 700 Club, they got to
Hmm.
be on
Well,
that.
yeah. Now they find their financial backing too, because they start doing speaking engagements and college lecture tours. They also, showing up on talk shows like you mentioned, especially with Cheech and Chong, a famous one that they were a part of. Um, and
Cheech and Chong, who have also seen a fair amount of spirits.
right. So also at this point they go over Lorraine's psychic abilities during this time. And moving into the Arnie Johnson case, which is The Devil Made Me Do It, in 1980. This is Ed desperately wanting to establish a legal precedent for the existence of demons that can inform people's action, because if you can't do it scientifically, laws on paper can
Yeah.
solidify things.
And this one's really interesting because we are now squarely in the Satanic Panic time.
Yes.
And you mentioned that it happens in 80, and the trial is in 81. And so we have really interesting, it is interesting issues.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting that Ed it's a complete rethink of the strategy. Can we make the American judicial system enshrine demons, demonic possession, the devil, etc., into case laws.
Yeah.
And it turns out the American legal system does not want that.
No, judge tossed it out as an accessible defense. No evidence about it allowed, like at all. Which it's like he just didn't want to be the first judge that said the devil could make me. Like, of course not. Like,
yeah, and Johnson ends up serving like 5 years and getting an early release. And I think that the general vibe was this was mental illness or a break or whatever. And then, to my knowledge, just lived his life from there, after
yeah.
getting
For
prison.
those who don't know, this Arnie Johnson, his fiance's kid, they felt was possessed, and he begged the thing to take him. And after he was possessed, went and brutally murdered his landlord. Hence, the devil made him do it.
Yeah.
And this is the one. So this is the subject of the third Conjuring film, but this was the one that pissed people off the most because at this time in our world, like nobody's buying the devil, and this is trying to like make a case to like they think this is one of those cases of people getting mad because they think what's the words for it because the artist made it, that means they stand by what's in like that the devil made it do it. No, they're just making entertainment. These have largely been fictionalized. This is the horror movie series. Of course, it's going to side on the side of paranormal. It does. Oh, depiction meaning endorsement. This is not.
Yeah.
I never for once believe that the people making this believe that they're making entertainment. And yeah, it's based on a thing, but so was The Conjuring. And as we found out, the fucking Warrens didn't even make it much long in the Conjuring case before getting thrown out by the family themselves. So, like this is a fictionalized depiction of it that has to err on the side of paranormal. So,
or else it's not, or else it's a different movie.
Or else it's a different movie, and not like Conjuring stuff. The Conjuring believes that this is all real and heightens that because it believes it heightens the paranormal, and that's how it's always been. Granted, this one has a different vibe than the first two because it's like a more of a murderous thing than a possession thing, but it is what it is. It does not mean depiction, does not mean endorsement. You can make entertainments. You can make entertainments that you don't believe in the material, but you're making the entertainments. Like it's
right. Well,
it's a weird thing that's come in the social media era. But yeah, so
yeah, people don't understand that telling a story about something doesn't mean that you believe it
or personally want to live it or something.
Yeah.
Like it's so wild that we have to like play adult and be like, no,
it's like
Michael Jackson's
thing at the beginning of Thriller. Like this does not endorse a belief in the occult,
right? Which happened in the Panic because of the Panic.
Well,
because of werewolves and zombies.
Yeah, there's another American historical fact that's going on at the same time as the Devil Made Me Do It case. Reagan was elected in November of 1980, and very early in his presidency, Reagan is shot by Ralph Hinckley.
Right.
And Hinckley uses a defense that is not as really well known in American culture at that time, which is not guilty by reason of temporary insanity.
Yeah.
And it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
There. And I've associated that with the Devil Made Me Do It thing for a long time. Except in Hinckley's case, he was like an obsessive Jodie Foster fan and all the crazy shit along with it. Poor Jodie Foster's going to carry her out the rest of her life.
Right. At least Reagan survived.
But
it'd be really bad if he didn't.
But you know what's really interesting about it is they always associate it with Jodie Foster, and really, it's a full-on craziness of like him kind of picturing himself as Travis Bickle, because
true.
Foster is ingrained in Travis trying to save Jodie Foster.
It's the character as portrayed by Jodie Foster, but not Jodie Foster the person.
Yeah, so Hinckley has a very particular, vivid fantasy thing that manifests itself into him shooting Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and which, yeah, spoiler, Reagan survived. But this is happening at the same time, and it's kind of interesting that nobody connected the two. That you never hear the Hinckley thing mentioned in conjunction with the devil made me do it, but the it's not my fault defense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's same time period.
Yeah. Like, yeah, we were talking about the boring realities of things and people wanting something other than truth. Which we jump to 1986. So we're leaning on the end of the panic here, the succubus exorcism in Pennsylvania, which occurs at the Devil House. This one has lots of sounds, smells, shaking of objects. There's the theory that an old mine shaft may be causing this. There's black shadows, grabbing a leg from a bed, dragging him to the floor, floating to the ceiling. A woman apparition attacking a husband sexually. And I love that. I'm sorry. This statement.
Brandon finds funnier than
The statement that Ed says that they put in from Ed, the quote he says, it's like, it's an insult to the birth cycle of Jesus Christ and God. That's why they do it. I'm like, okay. They use religious provocation, which is using religion to get rid of evil. This one proved too powerful for Ed and Lorraine to battle. They needed help, but the church said no. The church was trying to be secret and shunning the Warrens at the time. Like, leave us the fuck alone.
That's right.
And then they said, and Ed says, Ed or the church guy, one of them says, God lets this happen every now and then to prove he can stop the devil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aren't you glad that you get to be Job?
Yeah. God loves his children, except the ones that he lets the devil possess and attack. Like, that's what?
It's an interesting one because it's almost following the horror movie cycle. When you have a bunch of sequels, you have to get like more lurid.
Yeah.
And more stuff. It's like, well, everybody's bored with stuff falling off shelves. Let's sex the story up a little bit.
Now we got smells.
But also mid 80s, there's a few cycles of like the Grace Jones vampire stripper movie, Vamp. You've got a few of these like cycles of that. So is that what suggested succubus thing?
Yeah.
You got, or maybe they were regularly showing some of the Karnstein Hammer movies on Night Flight,
right?
Mid 80s.
Yep.
Like, was that up late one night, caught Daughters of Darkness, and he's like, hey, you know what? That Ingrid Pitt, man.
She is swell. I'd let her haunt me.
Yeah, I mean, like, what is there a cycle of that?
Right.
The 80s also, mid 80s are in a big sexual fear cycle because of AIDS also.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And so this is like right at home, it's right in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, this is
like,
true.
I am unsurprised, just as I would be unsurprised if like some flower child was possessed in 1969. I would be.
Honey, are you masturbating in the hallway? No, a ghost woman. She came and she was evil. So
I was just reading James Joy.
Smells like semen. It's the ghost. It's the semen smell in the house. It's this chronic masturbator that's just like trying to blame
the great Lost Saturday Night Live sketch, the attack of the masturbating zombies.
Right. What's that smell? Like, it smells in this house. It must be the devil. It's like, yeah, that's what it is. And they placed those magazines from Hustler over in the closet.
I mean, folks, we say this like once an episode of this, but you sometimes just gotta laugh about it. I know that there's some people who deeply feel like a lot of this stuff is real and everything, but at the same time, come on. Like, some of this stuff is hilariously overwrought.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the kind of skepticism and thoughts that I don't think Ed and Lorraine would go to. Like, that's just not in their wheelhouse. Like, they seem pretty straightforward, like straight, like stiff conservative, like wouldn't even think of like, a thing like that.
It's the
But
executives.
yeah,
How about Jason in space?
yes. Oh,
Are we talking about like a sex demon? I mean, there's sex demons, right?
right. Sexcubus. You want to call it the Sexcubus case? No. That same year, we moved. You teased this before. The Haunting in Connecticut happened there from 1986, which had a movie made, but not with the Warrens or not The Conjuring. They had Jesse Eisenberg in that one, I believe.
Yeah, and that is, if I'm not mistaken, this story that Ray Garton wrote the fictionalized account. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's
Gotcha. Which this one, perfectly enough, takes place in a house that was formerly a funeral home.
Which, holy shit, by the way.
Yeah. Were they told that before they moved in? Like, I know some people that would jump at a chance to buy something like that, but
well, the stuff's still in the basement.
Yeah.
Like that this is the one that comes close to like the premise for a horror film.
Right.
It's like, oh, we just bought this nice new house. What's this? It's like a fucking crematorium.
Yeah. It's a pizza oven, right? No. No.
Yeah, it's a really long pizza oven for those 6-foot long monster pizzas that you want.
So yeah, there's a ghost telling a son to do bad things, and Philip, it whispers. The son has cancer, and the mom though thinks, hey, it's probably the cancer treatment's causing hallucinations. And then it's not till a niece comes over and claims to be not sexually assaulted, but having her clothes being tugged at by an entity. And then there's a rosary and crucifix that shatter because, theatrics. So they call the Warrens. And Ed says, I suspected necrophilia. But there he goes nowhere about it. Like, why? What dead body was getting boned here? Like, what?
In what way? Yeah.
In what way? Like,
you expect that it was happening while it was an operating mortuary, and then that has caused the haunt. They also
is that what? Oh, that's what he's saying. Okay.
They also talk about necromancy too, not just
Yeah.
the idea, which if you're not familiar, kids, necromancy is the black magic that involves the use of dead bodies, either using the body parts to scry or talk to spirits, or else using them for purposes of conjuring.
Mm-hmm. There's an exorcism performed there, which includes the sacred rite of absolution. And the people of the house are warned people have died during exorcisms, and it must not stop till it's finished. Strange sounds occur from the basement during this. They call it a full-scale spiritual war. And apparently it's successful, and the woman moves the fuck out right after, even though it's been cleared. But she says what the Warrens do is they close the door, but the door remains there, and you got to be careful not to open it again in case they need some more money for a return visit.
Yeah. Burn the house down. That's what
yeah. So that's one of that's the last case in the 80s that we talk about here. But yeah, so this is a very eventful one, including exorcism, and Ed is ordained to be the first non-priest exorcist in the United States, because I think they just did it to be like, could you just fucking do them on your own and leave us alone?
Right.
We need to send people.
Right about, let's see, there is let me find the date real quick. Let's see. In 1991, ABC's 2020 documented a real exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like on the tail end of everything. But it was interesting because nearly everything that we knew in the culture about exorcism came from sort of The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Because exorcism wasn't something that was really talked about in the culture. Like, good luck going and finding other books and stuff about exorcists before Blatty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the word is used. the word is used biblically when, Jesus meets the man is possessed by legion and so forth, and like exorcising the demon. Those words are used, right?
Right.
But it's not a thing that's prevailing in culture until Blatty. And then we find out, there's like rituals and there's like a rule book. What the fuck, And so this thing that becomes,
checklist. Yeah.
all then, but then, then there's this one that we just talked about in the mortuary, but then 2020 shows clips of it. And I actually, in a journalism fellowship, one of the instructors was the producer from 2020 who produced that segment. And he had a lot of glowing things to say about Barbara Walters and stuff. He's an interesting cat. I won't say his name just because I like the guy a lot. I'm just not going to try to embarrass the dude or anything. But he says when he's talking about it, because we would meet these Zoom meetings, there's like journalists from around the country and whatnot. And I remember he's like, next week we're going to talk about a segment I worked on, or it'll show some clips. It was like where we filmed a real life exorcism, and I'm like, oh shit, you worked on that? Like, did not contain my
good.
delight, And he's like, oh, you remember it? I'm like, goddamn right, I remember that. And then because it was a big deal, it was heavily publicized and on TV. I remember watching it at the time, and so this was the first time, Brandon. This is the origin story.
Yes.
The first time I gave the Satanic Panic, quote unquote, talk prior to Cult Catholic.
Okay.
We were in DC for one of our in-person meetings for the group, and I'd been talking about it. And he had mentioned the fact that he's like, Troy actually knows a lot about this. And we're sitting in DC, sitting there with about 15 people, like a lot of them a lot younger, but then some of the people for the Post. And I'm like, okay, Satanic Panic, here we go. And I talked about it. The Michelle remembers on up, and everybody was like, because a lot of the younger
another round, please, another round.
A lot of the younger journalists didn't know about it. Because some of them were shit. Some of those kids were 20 years younger than I was,
right?
And so they're like, "What the hell, man?" Or 25 years younger, so they had no clue. And then like the people that were closer to my age were like, "That happened."
Yep, it's so wild.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely one of those things. But this exorcism train of cultural awareness was something that only developed from Blatty on up. It was a secret. So when you talk about Ed gets ordained, that is weirdly a big deal.
Yeah.
If it indeed happened the way that, because I think the thing that the Warrens were very good at self-promoting. And it says if you look up, like if you do any research on them, there's a couple, like if you look at their Wikipedia page, for example, there's a segment on people who have met with them to debunk them. And they've been interviewed by people who said, oh, it's just all bullshit. But they've also been interviewed by other people who are like, they were really nice people, but it's all bullshit.
Yeah, there are a lot of people have said that they really like them as people. I've noticed, and I know some people that there's really sweet people, really nice people, but I've never heard those people say it's all bullshit what they did, but I've heard that they're very nice people.
Well, and they seem to have custodians of their legacy in a way with their daughter, Judy, which I always want to say Jane, his wife, after I say that. But her husband, Tony, was the host of the TV show that they had.
Right.
And
Seekers of Super.
Tony Spera a lot. And, he's a big believer. And a lot of the people that are the researchers and whatnot obviously were trained by the Warrens.
Yeah, because after this one, they go on to train. They have too many cases, and they pretty much create a scouting crew because, according to these people, they go check out, confirm. If the Warrens thought it was worth it, they go and restart the investigation. Yeah.
Now, for legal reasons, obviously, we can't get into a lot of this, but there is a dark side. There have been some allegations about Ed having inappropriate relationships and some grooming allegations, and some outlets like Vox and so forth have covered that in great detail. And there's some legal paperwork floating around regarding the movies and what they could and couldn't say, etc., pursuant to those accounts. And just mainly because I don't want to get Brandon sued. I don't want to get into that. but that's a dark side,
Yeah.
which, you know, maybe you read about that on your own if you're curious about it. I don't think that we have really the forum here to
They're
dig
not
into
without
that.
controversy
Yeah,
and other non-paranormal cases that are around, and you can research and do your own thoughts. But I mean, if we're gonna be skeptical about their research and stuff, we can be skeptical about that. Um, but in some of it, like, one could be like, well, someone, maybe the person was like fine with it, but then someone told them, no, you were groomed in this, you should go get that. There's a
yeah.
whole, we don't know the context. We weren't there living. Maybe, you never know.
And we haven't sat down and read like the open lawsuit records and things
Right,
like that.
right.
We don't do that. But it does I will say that a a semi true thread that ran through the 80s while the Satanic Panic stuff was going on, that a whole lot of people who were televangelists and big personalities had really bad sex related falls.
Yeah, yeah. Which I'd say, going with it, like Ed Warren seems like the most asexual boy. Like, I feel like that's the last thing on his mind. Like, he just doesn't come across as, but you don't know who people are when the cameras or the recorders are off either. So
Right.
there's that.
Yeah, which the uh the thing that's going to run through any kind of puritanical upswing is always going to be the dark side of the people who are pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so it's really interesting in the um Satanic Panic era. Like the Warrens, like we said, they started in the 50s.
Yeah.
So they exist in a way outside of this, but sort of experience a period of much greater fame during during the proper
Mm-hmm.
years of it. So they're like way ahead of this curve, but they weren't a thing that sparked this. Like I think like Brandon said, like more people probably got freaked out about the thing under the bed because of The Exorcist than anything that
Yeah. Yeah.
Warrens ever did before, the 80s.
Yeah.
And
Um, Speaking of that, we go through a whole thing about like physical outbursts and crazy things that happen with these people who were the trainees or the understudies and stuff that they saw. And they Ed says physical restraint is often the least of our worries, because they talk about people breaking out of like chains and things like that. And
yeah.
um, but the last case they go over in detail is the Devil on Trial case in Hebron, Kentucky from 1990. It's a rented house that's haunted. The realtor suing the woman who fled. She wins this case, and it's one of Ed's most proud achievements, where he says, "We proved there were ghosts, and you can't get scientific in the supernatural world. So if you can prove in the court of law, that's good enough."
Yeah.
So that was the last case where there was a legal precedent that the woman won her case over her landlord. And yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, slumlord.
Well, and that is interesting because this, that was one of Ed's goals, was to get it in the legal record. But
Hmm.
considering as wacky as this country can be sometimes, there, boy, the courts really run the screaming from
Yeah.
acknowledging anything.
Well, because if you open that gate, like, just think of all yeah, I get wanting to prove paranormal's true or all that stuff, but like, then you go to aliens, then you go to and then you go, like, it becomes a whole can of worms that,
Yeah.
yeah. And
It,
then
it,
say the Warrens are genuine, say that, like, but like the opportunists then come out, even with your best intentions, and that you truly believe and you got it proven and that worked. But then here come the opportunists. Everybody who murders somebody is going to say the devil had them do it.
yeah. Well, Yeah, it's sort of like that George Carlin bit where he talks about how many people believe in angels, and he's like, "Why angels? Why not zombies?" It's because they're not reliable. It,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, but yeah, if you're going to start codifying
Like
the,
what set of precedent could you like achieve to know that that person was possessed? Like how would you like how like you have a set of stuff for it, but it's not an official. So like if it's paranormal, if it's supernatural, the rules of our linear and like stable, solid like Earth world don't apply. The supernatural doesn't have those laws that we know of or can measure. So what if one person say one person was actually possessed, but it doesn't fit Ed's criteria. So he's like, no, we wasn't possessed. But the one, like it's too loose and screwy Louie to really bring analysis. And Ed should know that himself.
we live in a world where there are people who still believe the Earth is flat.
Yeah, just made a comeback. Yeah.
Which, oh my God, you know, all
Mm-hmm.
the things that have to work with the curve of the Earth, from artillery to flying to how do you think your fucking cell phone works?
Yeah.
Uh, it's just the dumbest
The
shit.
giant steps back. And I believe, those people that are just there now, they just have the means to let the world hear how stupid they are. Like and then convince people, other idiots, of new idiotic ideas. Like that's how this happens. Great. The internet exists, social media exists. We can connect with people. We should be able to see how people from other countries aren't scary. They're just like us. But no, we haven't achieved that. We've gone back to thinking the Earth is flat. So
Well,
yeah,
and that in a way it also preserves and reinforces the superstition.
yeah.
As we've mentioned before, and I am endlessly fascinated by, in Africa in the last few years, we have had witch panics and vampire panics,
Mm-hmm.
in Malawi in particular, that one. But damn, that's that's scary,
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
is it really so different than our library panic
Yeah.
had in the States in the last few years? I mean,
Right.
I think in some ways the internet enables people, but in other ways, I think maybe the internet is the only thing protecting us from some of these full-on moral panics.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have 10,000 people saying something really fucking stupid, you have like a million people who say, okay, we're not letting you take libraries. Fuck off.
Right. 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 Right.
That
Ex-
maybe there's only like just today, um, as we are filming this, like Kurt Cameron started a whole avalanche of filth thing about scholastic book clubs.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, all he's doing is playing the same notes of the same song that we've been talking about in every one of these
Mm-hmm.
installments. He's just trying to make people afraid of
Yeah.
be afraid of Fun Home. Be afraid of Raina, you know?
Right. No.
Dude.
Oh, so during this outro, this epilogue, they have the Warrens open a museum to the public. Annabelle is the most popular item there, giving them to a nurse who that is infested by devils. This doll, and the daughter says, "My mom said never look her in the eye," and the daughter feels that their room of antiques is pretty oppressing and has a real heavy feeling when you're in there. Um, and then there's a haunted tunnel in Japan that they get flown out to exhibit, and Ed visits Nagoya while he's there, where he was when he found out his daughter was born. They go to the dock, the specific point where they found out, and then not long after he had a stroke and was in a coma for 11 weeks. And they try to like tie that as if the supernatural got him full circle. Like
Yeah.
if it would have happened while he was there in that moment, sure. But they're like, and a couple weeks later, like
Well, two things, and I'm not making fun of poor Judy here, but number one, Lorraine told her not to look in the eyes of a doll that doesn't have eyes. It's a Raggedy Andy. It's part of the pattern, or Raggedy and Andy.
right,
It doesn't have like button eyes, like Coraline or anything.
right.
They're just fabric. But the other thing is, um, I imagine Judy does feel strange going to that museum.
Yeah.
If I wonder how much of that is I feel like a spiritual darkness, and how much of it is this is what my parents did while I stayed with my grandma.
Yeah.
Like, I bet it does feel oppressive. I bet it feels like your childhood was taken away
This
from
is
you.
this is the room that's more important than raising me and being with me. Like that's kind of, yeah. I get you there.
This is where they were in Connecticut, and this is where they were in California, and this is
Yeah.
where I was with grandma.
This would have been my room, but so Ed passes away in 2006. Tony Spera helps Lorraine continue lectures and such. The Conjuring movie gets made in 2014, I believe. Spera's proud of what Farmiga and Wilson accomplished there. He doesn't say anything about the movie itself. He's just very happy with the portrayals of the actors. And then Lorraine dies on April 18th of 2019 at age 92. And then Tony Spera, huh?
I was just gonna say, I believe she went to the premiere of the
Yeah,
I believe she's at the
yeah, she was there. And then Tony Spera, he has sort of served as the curator of their legacy with a YouTube channel, continued information, writings, stuff like that. So he is carrying their legacy in a way.
and will probably not be a guest on this show anytime soon.
No, probably won't.
But I also feel like they don't give interviews where they would be challenged either.
No, they don't want to go there. No. Because in their defense, on the spot answering a question may come off wrong as how they're, trying to answer when they're being truthful and stuff. So I could see, even as a true believer, they know that something, if they make one false move, it could be taken in a whole context. So they like pre-recorded things. They like to know the questions ahead of time. You know, they want to do something that's a celebration, not a deconstruction of what they're doing. I can understand that in the careful manner with which is something that they're doing. That's a very even in the fact, like saying that, assuming they are true believers of all this, they know the skepticism and they want to behold what the work and stuff they've done rather than being torn apart. Like the ridicule is already there. And as years pass, it becomes tougher and tougher for them to hold on to that, especially old cases, which nowadays could probably have been easily explained, or film it, show us. Like, and would Ed and Lorraine and younger people be the people doing ghost hunting shows where they add the effects, plant things in spots, make overreact to little things? And maybe that's what it was like being with them at a place anyway.
Yeah. We are now in a time when everybody has a camera.
Yeah.
So, have huntings gone down because, people can easily whip the camera out and prove that nothing was there, or that it's easy to verify, because certainly we're way more familiar with police abuses and other stuff because cameras are pervasive.
Right. But the aliens and paranormal have gone down.
Yep. Funny.
Yeah.
Funny about that.
The truth is out there. It right in front of our faces with police brutality and all sorts.
All right. Come here a second, Kyle. I got a special guest. My son Kyle just arrived in the door from a carnival party at AMC, and
good. Perfect.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You can't do horror stuff without a creepy clown.
Yep, fantastic.
But yeah, so that wraps up this whole shock doc thing that basically is an expose and a celebration of the Warrens, or one last chance to convince people of the truth. But this is an entire series of things like that. Basically pro paranormal, no skepticism. type of thing. So I went. You brought it. So we brought this one up, Troy, and like we're like, okay, we'll do that. And then you watched it and was like, oh, this is some propaganda. But I was like, well, we'll take it. We'll just do our thing with it. That's what we can do. And you're like, yeah.
I was expecting more of a conventional documentary as opposed to something that was just completely unquestioned.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 100% presented as if everything is real. There's no voice of dissent.
No.
Except maybe that one sheriff that's ananecdotally says, "Get out."
Meant to look like an a-hole. He's not painted in a light that like, well, here's an opinion,
Yeah, it is not an even, you have a person on this side and a person on this side kind of thing. It's it's all this was 100% real, and this is what happened.
Yeah. And like this, he's painted that one contrarian's painted as he stopped, the truth was coming and he stopped it. Or like, this is what we are up against when we do this. That's kind of the dissent is only painted that way. So, we mentioned earlier, so like Tori and I are planning as right now, our plan is, the next Products of the Panic, which will probably be after the summer of 2004 at 20. We're going to do like a full-blown expose analysis series of episodes on the Amityville horror and the many different lenses and pens with which it's presented and has been. And so like talk about the book, talk about maybe a documentary or two, or like we're going to definitely cover the first two movies because they cover the Lutzes and the DeFeos, which the second one I think is a better movie. And it's a very wildly fantasy version of the DeFeo case. But I think it's a fun movie. It's really good. And then the original Amityville horror movie and everything around it. So we plan on digging deep there into the Amityville stuff. But until then, which Troy will be back for summer 2004 at 20, some fun music video stuff down the road here. But where can people keep up with you?
They can keep up with me at the Saturday Evening Post, SaturdayEveningPost.com, and all of the social stuff. That's where you'll see my articles. I'm on the usual Facebook threads, everything. Troy Brownfield, if you're interested in following me there.
Gotcha. And I'm on the socials at Brandon4KUHD. PopCon is coming to Indianapolis at the end of April, and time to get yourself some tickets. If you have a podcast, enter it in the podcast awards. If you can attend and would like to do a live recording of your own show in front of an audience, sign up for the live podcast stage. I'll be handling both of those, and I'd love to have you. It's going to be a fantastic weekend, which includes, I can say now, Elijah Wood and Andy Serkis, as well as cast members of Arrow, of The Flash, Walking Dead, Dean Norris, Jim Cummings, and many of the top anime and video game voice actors in the business. You won't want to miss it. It's a fun weekend. And beyond, I know the celebrity stuff is what gets people draw these, but I will say PopCon's got the best vibe of any convention coming to the Indianapolis area throughout the year. It is a vibe of people who like to do the things that happen, not just stand in line for autographs and merch. And they enjoy each other, and it's like a family environment of people like, okay, we're going to go to PopCon and hang out. And then what's at PopCon? That's kind of what happens. It's unlike anything. I'd say Horror Hound has that vibe if you're familiar with conventions, but PopCon, very, very fun time. You can also catch me. I will be at Indiana Comics Convention in promotion of PopCon at the end of March. So if you want to find me there, say hi, and we'll talk about PopCon while we're at Indiana Comic Con, because that's where it's at. But speaking of that, you'll hear more about PopCon on the next episode as owner of PopCon himself, Carl Doninger, joins us, and we're going to talk all about PopCon. So until then, stay film positive.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios, and no infringement is intended. Additional information on this and other episodes at BrandonPetersShow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail at BrandonPetersShow.com. The show is available on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.